Hey there, college football fans. My name is Chris Manning, and this is the Royal Blue and Burnt Orange 2 podcast. And we are going to review the latest week in college football for the Cougars. But unlike the prior 2 weeks where I've gone and broke down the film and talked about some of the things that were good and bad on the defense, there's really, unfortunately, I don't want to pile on the players this week. I can tell that things are getting kind of not great inside the locker room from some of the stuff that's been leaking out on the Cougar board and other social media. And so I don't want to pile on this team right now. That's not what they need. If you watch my prior posts, you can pretty much see, again, I had the same critiques of the defensive strategy, which I think right now is the weakness for the Cougs. The whole game, for most part, was a three-man front. Again, no blitzing, no pressure, no attempt to get to the quarterback, no run blitzes. So it's not shocking then that they were able to run for another 200 yards on us. And as long as, and I know a lot of this had to do with the fact that the defense has just been decimated with injuries. I don't know if there were 4 defensive linemen available. There were a lot of freshmen playing who hadn't got any playing time. I didn't know. Many times I had to look at the roster to see, who was out there. So I'm not going to pile on. Instead, this week with the college football playoff rankings about to come out, I decided instead, let's go ahead and kind of project, not what the 4-team playoff would be, because I think that's boring. And if you follow any of my other posts on Twitter, you'll see that I've been advocating for several years now for a 16-team playoff. Now, we do probably get a 12-team playoff here in a couple of years. Possibly they're going to be able to hammer that out. So first, I'm going to go over those projections right now based on the AP rankings. I'm going to use the AP rankings because I'm hoping that we're smart enough to get rid of the College Football Playoff Committee. I just don't think that 13 people is enough of a data set to, and particularly ADs who I doubt are watching very much college football. I hope we don't have them deciding. I would just much rather prefer be the AP. We go based on those rankings. So that's what I'm going to go over first. We'll go first with the 12-team, what the future of the college football playoff would look like at this point in the season. And then I want to show what a 16-team playoff would look like, which I've been advocating for. And I hope, even though, the talk is we're going to get a 12-team, I hope that the ADs and college football decides that, again, with the 12-team, you're still excluding almost half of the entire conferences from being able to play in the playoffs. Again, you're guaranteeing 1 seed to the non-P5 conferences, and now that BYU is going to P5, you'd think maybe I want to protect it. But I think in the long term, a 16-team is the way that that college football should go. So here we go. Here's what a 12-team playoff would look like. All right, so based on the AP rankings that came out earlier today, Georgia would get the number 1 seed out of the SEC. Ohio State would be number 2 out of the Big Ten. The 3 seed would be Clemson for the ACC. TCU out of the Big 12. Those would be the top 4 teams, and they would get the first round bye. Oregon would be the next highest ranked conference champion. And then Tulane out of the American Conference. So right now Tulane's sitting at 7-1. They would be the last team in for the conference champions. So Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, and TCU get first round bye, and we'd have Alabama traveling up to Michigan, playing Michigan. We'd have USC against Tennessee. Now that would actually be kind of interesting to see 2 of the most high-powered offenses in college football going at it. We'd have Ole Miss taking on Oregon, and UCLA going to Tulane. So in a couple of years, that's what a 12-team playoff would look like based on the rankings at this point in the season. And again, this is still pretty boring because it's all P5 with your 1 slot for your Tulane being the 1 team out of the non-P5 conferences that gets a shot at a championship. Now again, it's a long shot, but at least they get an opportunity. Right now there are 131 teams in FBS. And even with the 12 team, that's less than 10% of the teams even getting a chance in the playoffs. Okay, that is the lowest percentage of any sport in college. No other sport has so few teams given an opportunity to play in the playoffs. So now let's look at a 16 team. So the way that my 16 team, in my mind, how this would work is the top 8 conference champions get into the playoffs. They get the automatic qualification. And they also would host the first round at their university, so you get a home game. And the reason why I think this is the better route to go is because of how a playoff game for some of these non-P5 teams, how much of a change and what that could do for a program. So Tulane obviously right now would be the one getting in, and Tulane hasn't been particularly good at football in a long time, but a playoff spot would be massive. And in this scenario, we have at least 3 non-P5 teams that are going to get guaranteed a seat. And I like that better. It gives some of these smaller schools an opportunity to compete. And even though they've got a very steep road to the playoffs, maybe they have a Cinderella season and they make it to the semifinals or quarterfinals. And you go, oh, well, see, you're the best team won anyways. Georgia won anyway, so there was no reason to let Boise State play. Well, no. Maybe Boise knocks off Tennessee in some freak game because Tennessee's got to go play on the Smurf turf in Boise. That would be awesome. So, again, 8 teams. Nobody gets a bye. And here's what it would look like. So Georgia obviously still gets the number 1 seed out of the SEC, Ohio State. So the top 6 don't change from the 12th team. But at number 7 would be Coastal Carolina right now, who is the Sun Belt Conference's highest ranked team. And then Boise State, which unfortunately we got to take on next week, which I'm not so thrilled about that game right now, the way the team's been playing. I hope we can pull it off. I think that would be such a big emotional pickup for the team. So those would be the 8 conference champions. And I like this better. I mean, look at this. Now Georgia in the first round's got to get by a surging Kansas State, who just throttled Oklahoma State. I think that would be a very interesting game. And Tennessee, again, going up to the Smurf turf. Boise State hosting that game. You have UCLA taking on TCU. That's not, big news there. And unfortunately, we have a rematch of the USC-Oregon game. But that can't be avoided. Unfortunately, you will have some times where you got a rematch of a conference game. You've got Ohio State and Utah. So it's a replay of the Rose Bowl, but instead of being in Pasadena, it's taking place in the Horseshoe. So I think that's a great storyline that we don't have right now, and the emphasis on the bowls. I like this. That would be interesting to see Utah taking on Ohio State up at the Horseshoe. Then, like I said, Michigan's got to go to Coastal Carolina. I mean, come on. Think about how amazing that it would be for Coastal Carolina to host Michigan. And imagine if somehow they pull off the upset victory. Now, the way they could do this is Michigan doesn't know that this game's taking place until Wednesday. That way they can see, hey, they can play just like BYU did in the 2020 season. Ole Miss taking on Clemson, and then Alabama traveling next state to Tulane. Again, this sort of matchup, I think, is a lot more fun. It creates more drama, it creates more story, and it's going to get more eyeballs. And that's honestly what the executives should be looking at, because let's be honest, college football has now become about the money, with the Big 12 announcing that they're going to be pulling in nearly $50 million per team with their new contract. This would be a lot more interesting to watch than just the 12 team, in my opinion, right? Because you're bringing in a lot of eyeballs from parts of the country that never really have any reason to watch the playoff games. I mean, I don't really care to see two SEC teams go at it again. Now, maybe in this scenario, if 2 SEC teams make it, Georgia and Alabama make it. Okay, fine. That happened. But they had to get through a lot of other teams to get there, and other teams got a chance. And so those programs then, for years, you'd likely see a recruiting boost. And I think in the long run, this then creates more parity in college football. It'll take some time because of the structure since the BCS era of consolidating into just a couple teams, where the elite players in the team have coming out of high school have no incentive to go to any of these other smaller schools. But I think if this happens, it also kind of will transform the transfer window a little bit, right? So right now you're going to see a lot of changes, I think, with the transfer portal over the next couple of years. But again, with this helps create a little bit more stability. If you say, well, if we win our conference, we've got a good chance of playing in the playoff. And that will keep players there and invested in the programs that they're committed to. And I'd like to see that. It breaks my heart, but I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of Cougars that are going to leave, that are going to hit the transfer window this year. I mean, we were lucky. Very few people left last year, and I like that. But I have a feeling that because this year's kind of a down year, and things kind of maybe have broken down inside the locker room a little bit, that maybe that's not going to happen this time. Maybe there's going to be players leaving. I hope that doesn't happen. Anyways, I'm getting off track. So this is just a preview, something a little bit more fun, a little bit different this week. Next week, BYU's got to travel up to Boise State and finish their 10th game in a row. I think, honestly, that's part of the problem with this year is playing 10 games in a row. It's just brutal. No other team. I don't know if any other team in the country has played 9 games in a row like we have. Obviously, that's just one of the bad things about scheduling independence when your name's not Notre Dame and you can't really put leverage on someone else. But I honestly think that that's also played a role. I think if we had our bye week, maybe 5 weeks in, 4 weeks in, 6 weeks in, like everybody else, maybe that would have been an opportunity to rest, recover, and change the season. Those are what ifs and speculation, obviously. But anyways, if you like this video, the next 2 weeks for me are crazy for work. I am going to be working 70 hours a week for the next 2 weeks, so I don't know that I'm getting another video out. But also, if you're a BYU football player and you'd like to come on, I would love to, take 20 minutes of your time, have a conversation with you, and talk something other than the parts of the season. We talk more about you, think of it more of an interview. Not so much about the football season. We'll talk about that a little bit, but I'd be more interested in just getting to know you, kind of like how the Deep Blue segments go on, maybe like a Joe Rogan style where we just sit and talk. So if you happen to be a BYU player and you're watching this and you're interested in coming on maybe next week or during your bye week when you got some time and we could do just a 20-minute video, I'd greatly appreciate it. So like, share, comment, let you know, and hope everybody has a great week. See ya.